days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I'm known in this realm as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for some more palaver on Hail to Stephen King, all about the 40th anniversary of Night Shift. That is right, y'all. Gracias very much for joining me here for the second installment of this, and as I mentioned during the previous bit here, I am basically covering the 20 different short stories here in Stephen King's celebrated first collection of shorts that came out in 1978 in February, so exactly 40 years ago, and they are some of his absolute best and some of his most well-known. I mean, you've got Sometimes They Come Back, Children of the Corn, Trucks, which became Maximum Overdrive. I mean, there's so much stuff in here, but today we are covering the next 4 installments, which starts out with The Mangler. Did you ever see the movie? I kind of hope you didn't. I did, and I think I saw at least one of the sequels. Not a very fair representation of this story, because The Mangler is actually pretty flippin' awesome. You know, on paper, when you heard Tobe Hooper was directing, you're like, wow, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy, and I can't remember, yeah, he'd done Life Force at that point, that was in the 80s and stuff, and so Tobe Hooper, besides Texas Chainsaw, a lot of people felt was really hit and miss and stuff, and the feature film that he did, Robert Englund is playing this crazy, like, owner, foreman guy and stuff, and I mean, with all the talent assembled, you really thought the movie was going to be great, but the problem with taking King short stuff a lot of the time and trying to just beef it up into a feature film is you have to take some liberties and make some alterations, and I'm not here to talk about that story though, or excuse me, that movie. I'm here to talk about the short story, which I personally think is fantastic. You have basically a ginormous laundry press at this like seedy, poorly kept factory type place that has apparently pulled a woman in and smushed her to smithereens and pressed her down. And this machine, in all of its big, just mechanical magnitude, was already called the Mangler even before this crazy accident happened, and there is just like mush left. They take this woman out in a basket, which is just terrible to talk about. But so the investigator who is looking into this story starts talking with one of his best buddies who's an English professor, and they start to slowly theorize that maybe there is more than meets the eye about this accident. Could there possibly be an otherworldly, albeit demonic presence involved in this? Basically, is this device possessed? And the cool thing that King does here is that he obviously imparts a little of his own insight because he worked at a laundry press place, like a laundromat type place, when he was doing all of his different odd jobs before he really started getting big. And, you know, he was teaching during the day. So it's funny how, you know, King has always injected his own personal experiences, but this was, you know, the experiences of his youth working in a place like this. He was also teaching English on the side too. So there's like a little bit of both of those melding together, and there's just the way they explain how this came about. It actually makes a lot of sense and is pretty cool, especially once the English professor starts really diving deep into how this thing could have had this presence just suddenly appear within it. And it's well thought out, I gotta say, and it leads to a truly terrifying conclusion. And you know, once again, these are not spoiler reviews because I want you guys to go and seek out this book in any incarnation, whether, you know, you're lucky enough to find one of those original hardcovers, which took me forever to track down, or if you did, there's been various paperback releases of it. And so, yeah, The Mangler, it's the longest of these 4 stories, and yet you can still read it easily in a sitting, and since we're only doing 4 of these at a time, I want you guys, if you're inclined and interested, to follow me along through these stories. And you can play catch-up. You easily can, because most of these stories are like 10 to 20 pages. So, The Mangler, awesome story. And yeah, it shows just, you know, once again, King injecting his real-life experiences into a story of the otherworldly variety. So the next one that we get to now is The Boogeyman. Yes, and we actually did a Boogeyman short here on the horror show during the very first season of the show. Before we became an ongoing YouTube channel, we were at first doing Season 1, Season 2, and then Season 3 was where we basically turned into an ongoing channel as opposed to just filming big blocks of content and releasing them, you know, all at once. We were just like, we're gonna up our game and just keep this going. But in Season 1, before I was asked to join this program, yeah, they did a Boogeyman short. So if you go and check it. I think you can search through the different sketches that we did, or even if you just search Boogeyman on our channel here, you'll be able to locate it, and I recommend it. It's cool. But yeah, so the Boogeyman basically takes that time-honored trope of something evil being in your closet, and a force that, unless there is some sort of light and, something that can shun it away, especially for young kids, the darkness and, just the evil that's in your closet. It's been, for generations and generations and generations. I still remember back in the 80s when I was a kid, and specifically, I saw the real Ghostbusters, the TV show, and that was actually one of my favorite portrayals of the Boogeyman. He, especially as a kid, he's like had the earring and like the mohawk kind of thing going on and stuff, and this huge ass head, but it was cool the way they went into the closet at one point and they saw just his world, which was just a multitude of doors to all these different children's rooms, like thousands and thousands or millions or whatever. But the concept is done similarly here, although it's like you can't really confirm if this guy is going crazy or if there actually is a boogeyman, which is a similar aesthetic that they took with a few other stories here in Night Shift. It's obviously a theme that King really liked to go with, is like, like with I Am the Doorway, for instance. Is the guy really, is his story real, or is it just a bunch of bogus BS? And so you're not really going to know if it's one way or the other until, near the end of this story. But this guy is basically sitting in a psychiatrist's office telling about how he was responsible for the death of his kids, and obviously the shrink is like, so did you kill your children? And he's like, no, but I could have done something about it. And he claims that it's the boogeyman, that took his children and was the cause for their death, but, it leaves it vague enough, especially predominantly through the story, where you can tell the guy was irritable. He was having tensions with his family, with his wife. He says some pretty nasty things, especially this being, the early 70s and the Vietnam War still going on. He says some racist stuff in here. He says some stuff about counterculture movement. And so you can tell he's obviously a guy on edge. And so that adds an interesting element of mystery as he's telling about how one kid and then the next kid and, and so on and so forth. And it's pretty well done, I must say, especially somebody who likes the idea of the boogeyman and was scared crapless as a kid, not just from that real Ghostbusters, but because I had a very overactive imagination as a child, and so I genuinely would be sleeping in the bunk bed, and as old as like 7, 8, getting close to double digits, man, and I would think I would see like a witchly figure like walking down the hallway toward my parents' room, stuff like that, and I wouldn't know if it was a dream or if I was just half awake or whatever. I was a night terrorist type. I had a night light. Yeah, but that's probably why I was so fascinated with this stuff, because of the overactive imagination. But interesting thing is, in 1982, they actually did a short film about this. I believe the filmmaker's name was Jeffrey Shiro, maybe? But yeah, he was a New York film student, and just to give some context, after Night Shift came out and people, King's fame was rising, his stock was going up, there were so many different young and amateur filmmakers and students and stuff that were trying to option rights to make these shorts into short films, which is where I think that the shorts of Stephen King often work the best in the anthological format, and that's why they tried doing with a story that I'll come to near the end here. They did the Nightmares and Dreamscapes on TNT in like 2006, I want to say. But yeah, I think King's short stories work in an anthology format or in just a short film format. So with all of these requests coming in, King decided to do something very cool. He decided to invent a program called the Dollar Babies. Basically, the Dollar Babies, for those who don't know, is the ability for a student or amateur filmmaker, as I think it later became, to option the rights to create one of his films in your own vision for $1. $1 to option the rights and get the approval and stuff, which is really cool. It was a way of him giving back to his fans. It shows to me that King definitely had that teacher's background, and that he wanted to, once again, give back and really just try to, help push along and develop and culture the creativity of these young filmmakers. And so I must admit, Jeffrey Shiro one's not too bad. It's not amazing, and you can tell it's lower budget, but, for the time, the production values are good, the score is quite interesting, and you can find it on YouTube. It was released on VHS, along with The Woman in the Room, which was the Dollar Baby that Frank Darabont did, that got Stephen King's attention back in the 80s, long before he did Shawshank and The Mist and, stuff like that, The Green Mile, obviously, as well. So, yeah, if you can find that VHS, lucky on you, because I've been looking for years for it, but once again, you can find it on YouTube, and I recommend checking it out. The performance of the lead actor is not too bad, especially the interplay, once he's at the psychiatrist's office, and they alter some of the sequencing a little bit, but it doesn't detract from the storytelling. I gotta say, that adaptation is more faithful and better than The Mangler. A feature film with noteworthy talent behind it. I'm sorry, but especially the conclusion, much more effectively done. So yeah, I really like The Boogeyman, and it's a quick read. It's like 12 pages, guys, but yet it's effective and it works very, very well. So now we get to my favorite of these four. Oh yeah, guys. It's called Gray Matter. It's never been adapted in anything beyond the second volume of Secretary of Dreams, which, once again, always have to give a shout out to Cemetery Dance, to Blue Richard and the gang over there. They produce such awesome content, not just for King, but for, their magazine and for all kinds of other, up and coming or maybe not as known horror writers. Just their deluxe editions and things like that are tremendous. You see a few of them here, but in Volume 2 of Secretary of Dreams, Glenn Chadbourne did such great illustrations for this story, which is, without giving too much away, it's about a guy who has a can of beer that had just a little crack in it or something. Who knows what sort of strange bacteria got in there and developed beyond the, the rotten yeast and all that already, which is what, drinking alcohol of any kind is all about, is letting something spoil. But something spoiled beyond the point that is obviously not going to completely destroy you. And this guy gets, I don't know if you would describe it as a parasite or something, but he decided to drink down this can of cheap beer that his son went to the store and got for him because this guy's disabled and, after getting hurt at the mill or the, whatever it was that he was working on, I can't recall exactly, even after rereading it, just today. But that's of inconsequence. He's basically on workman's comp, and he has his kid going out to get the beer for him, super cheap beer because he's on a fixed budget, and he decides to drink this can because he's so much of a booze head that has like this gray, slimy stuff on top. And he drinks it down anyway, and even when he says, "That's the most horrible thing I've ever tasted," ugh, he finishes it, and long story short, he starts to change, and so much so that the kid goes to the general store or hangout, whatever type place where he's been getting his dad's beer for him, and he requests the help of some of these, good old boys, in Bangor to come and help him out because he's scared and worried about his dad. That's all that I can tell you, but it's a story that I would so love to see adapted for, you would really need to have the no constraints type aspect. Maybe you could do it for network television in an anthology format of some sort, but to really get the full effect of just kind of the transformation aspect, you would really need some great practical, and it could be done, and I would love to see it done. Gray Matter is in my tops of all of the stories on here, even though, once again, it's like a dozen pages, but it's effective, and it is genuinely scary, and it actually, there's one scene in particular where a character is talking about a friend of his that pretty much went crazy after, he's climbing in the sewers, and he was one of those guys that, would go down and investigate the piping and things like that, and he saw something down there that turned his hair white and basically screwed him up for, the rest of his life. And so, yeah, there's certain things that if a man saw, he just cannot fathom what he has gazed upon, and how could madness not set in? So, Gray Matter is fantastic, and it's one of my favorite, not just of this collection, but one of my all-time favorite Stephen King shorts, and it's tough to track down because it's out of print, but you can find it for around $100. I definitely recommend checking out the Secretary of Dreams Volume 2, because that's where you'll find Gray Matter, as well as a couple other shorts from this particular collection, one of which is One for the Road, which is kind of an epilogue of sorts to Jerusalem's Lot, and I think Strawberry Spring is in there too. I'd have to double check my notes, but lo and behold, we now get to the final story that we are covering today, the fourth and final, and the eighth that we have covered so far. So if you want to catch up, guys, I've only read up to this point the first 8 stories in my reread here. So pick up a copy, or download it on Audible or audiobooks. Or another one that I discovered recently is I think it's called Scribr. It's scribr.com. It's essentially like the Netflix of audiobooks, and for a monthly subscription fee, and they give you like a free 30 days or something. There are so many Stephen King audiobooks on there, and you can just, if you're wanting to, discover his stuff while you're driving around or while you're doing housework or whatever. I like to do that with King stuff now. Now that I've read everything, if I'm sick of podcasts or not feeling like blasting some metal or whatever, I'll just, throw on a King audiobook because I have tons of them. And it's a fun way when you're rereading something to continue through it. And gotta say, King is a big proponent of audiobooks. I've mentioned this countless times. That's why he had his kids reading books and recording it so that he could listen to it. When I saw him and Owen at the Naperville stop in just outside of Chicago for the Sleeping Beauties book tour, he gave a very interesting story about how he would have Owen just read books and record it and make audio versions of these novels for him. It was great. So the last one that we're coming to, it's my least favorite of definitely these four. It's called Battlefield. You can tell my demeanor changed right away, right? When I was younger and I read this story, I thought it was kind of lame. And when I got older and reread it again, and when I reread it just today, it's silly to me, Once again, I'll use one of my dad's favorite phrases. Long story short, you've got this professional hitman. He goes and kills a toy maker, and then when he gets back to his penthouse, he has a package arrive that he thinks is from his mother, and it's got a box of G.I. Joes, the real American hero! Yeah, and it's like Vietnam, like box of, those steel, tactical boxes almost that you could get of the little G.I. Joes and stuff, to store them in. And there's little miniature tanks and copters and, launchers and all kinds of different stuff. And he doesn't think anything of it. He's just like, whatever. Well, my gin and tonic, I'm just going to chill and relax and just decompose after just, you probably need some time to compose yourself. Even if you're a hardened killer of sorts, like this guy, and a professional at that. But lo and behold, the little dudes start attacking him, and the story's only 10 pages. There's not really a lot to chew on. It's a pretty simple concept, and one, interestingly enough, that King borrowed from a 1961 Richard Matheson Twilight Zone episode, which had a similar thing about soldiers and, this guy fighting them and whatnot, little miniature toy soldiers. And it's something that we saw in the 90s with small soldiers, and even in Tales from the Hood, where the little dolls are attacking the racist guy and stuff. So I don't like this story very much. I'll just say it once again. I gotta say though, while rewatching the Nightmares and Dreamscapes episode of this, which was the very first episode of the TNT series as well, stars William Hurt as the professional killer, and directed, of all people, by Brian Henson. Yeah, Jim Henson's son, who went on to direct a lot of the Muppet stuff. He's working on a new film called The Happy Time Murders, which is supposed to be a neo-crime noir, half puppets and half people murder mystery. I think that sounds interesting. But he directed this episode, and it's about an hour long, and I gotta say, even if I don't like the story very much, it's pretty slickly directed. And it's one of the few times where they expanded on a story of King, and I felt like it was pretty effective. Interesting thing they do with this episode as well, which, you can find Nightmares and Dreamscapes on home release, and I'm sure it's floating around on the YouTube somewhere as well. Maybe. I own it, so I didn't need to do that, but it's probably around there somewhere. And they expand on the front half of the story that you just see in the short, the character getting back from. You actually see him, go to this toy making facility and, take out the security guards and go and murder in, for TNT, much more graphic fashion than I would realize. I mean, you see shots and blood coming from the chest. I think he shoots him in the head too. But that half, all of the expansion that they do at the beginning as he's getting back to his penthouse and being at the airport and all these different things, it's well acted, it's well shot, and William Hurt, being a seasoned actor and one that I respect a lot, actually, respect the hell out of, he does a damn good job. And another effective implement that they do, just a very deliberate tactic, is there's no dialogue throughout this whole thing. So maybe that hurts with some of the pacing and the fact that it's an hour long, but it's still an interesting approach, and the effects with the dolls or toys, I should say, toy soldiers, but you know, it's funny, my best friend's father, when I was growing up, we'd be playing with Battle Beasts, or we'd be playing with you know, Masters of the Universe or whatever. He always called them dolls, and we're like, they're not dolls, Mr. Ricketts, they're action figures, man, you know, you just don't understand. And he would just make fun of us all the time for playing with dolls. But so the little soldiers, the way that they film them actually going around and the close-ups of them and, you know, things like that, it's actually, even for the times, there's certain parts where the CG looks a little dated, but it's filmed. I mean, Brian Henson knew what he was doing, and he had some genuine vision, and it holds up fairly well. If I was to say anything, compared to the 10-page story in this, even if I can't say I'm particularly fond of either, I like the Nightmares and Dreamscapes a whole lot better than I do this short story. So definitely read it though and make up your own mind. You know, art is subjective is something that I always like to say. You may really dig this story. I just thought it was kind of corny. So, you know, once again, just my opinion. Read it and make up your own mind. That's what this is all about, because I want you guys to continue reading this along with me. The next 4 stories, just to double check, are going to be, we've got Trucks, which is, well, it was obviously adapted into the really crappy sci-fi version of Trucks, or maybe it was USA Network, I can't remember, but it was like in the late 90s, and it was even worse than the one that King directed, which was very R-rated and very violent, called Maximum Overdrive. But I like the short story, so we got Trucks coming next. Second one is going to be Sometimes They Come Back, one of my absolute favorites. Pretty decently adapted too, but the short story is a lot darker. Then we've got Strawberry Spring, and then we have The Ledge. And so, yeah, that's the next 4 that I'm going to be covering this upcoming Saturday. And yeah, Saturday the 24th, I want to say. Yeah, Saturday, well, this upcoming Saturday, before I double check my dates. So, yeah guys, that's basically the name of the game, and I want you to read this with me or listen to it on the audiobookies or the Scribber or whatever. So, I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube relaunch coming right around the time of the Oscars, where I'm going to be talking not about scary stuff, because my Infuegotainment YouTube channel was never about that, because we don't want to, you know, just have a conflict of interest. That's where I cover other sorts of film, or at least did for a while before taking an extensive break, because we've been doing so much on the horror show. Trying to find a decent way to balance the time is tough, especially since, you know, I'm also in a metal band too, so takes up a lot of time. So yes, definitely like, share, subscribe with the hashtag Hail to Stephen King on all of your social medias. You know, Twitter is where I spend most of my time, but I'm also on the Instagrammies, as I mentioned, and whatnot. Subscribe here to The Horror Show once again, and yes, make sure to comment below. Tell me what you thought of this video, if you have any suggestions for Hail to Stephen King going forward, because after February we're going to be shifting back to regular episodes. But I just love this collection of shorts so much, this and Just After Sunset being my favorites, as I said during the last video. But all of King's collections are good, and it doesn't employ as much dedication as one of his big, thick brick novels does. The cool thing is, if you get a collection of his shorts, you can read one night, chill out till the next night, read another one. They're not going to involve as much dedication, so to speak. It's, you know, it's like a TV series of anthology, like a Tales from the Crypt or an Outer Limits or a Masters of Horror or whatever. You can just watch them whenever you have your spare time, read one whenever you have your spare time, and they're just little awesome, deliciously devious bite sizes of horror. So once again, I've been Jaime and Fuego. You peeps have been awesome, and I always appreciate your viewership here on Hail to Stephen King. And make sure to join me this Saturday for part 3, where we will be covering the next 4 installments of Night Shift. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more to that episode when we meet again, hasta luego, constant viewers. And I am hopeful that we see one another sooner rather than later. And when that does indeed happen, stay scared and read Stephen King. Especially Gray Matter if you get the chance to in this, because oh boy, damn, it's good.